Wyoming Territory, 1873. The dust devil swirled across the open range like a ghost seeking vengeance, and Quinn Prescott watched it from astride his buckskin gelding with eyes that had learned not to hope for much beyond the next sunrise. At 25 years old, he had already buried more people than most men met in a lifetime. His parents to cholera on the Oregon Trail when he was 14, his younger brother to a Cheyenne arrow 2 years later, and the girl he had planned to marry to typhoid fever just last spring. The frontier took everything eventually, and Quinn had built his life around a simple truth. Survival meant keeping your heart as guarded as your campsite. Love was a luxury that got you killed or left you hollow when death inevitably claimed what you cherished. He adjusted the worn hat on his head, his clean-shaven jaw tight as he surveyed the vast emptiness of the Wyoming grasslands stretching toward the Medicine Bow Mountains. At just over 6 feet tall, with a lean, athletic build earned from years of hard riding and harder work, Quinn cut a striking figure against the endless sky. His sandy brown hair curled slightly at his collar, and his blue eyes held the kind of wariness that came from watching the world take more than it gave. He worked as a ranch hand for the Double T spread, saving every dollar toward a piece of land he could call his own, a place where he could live alone, die alone, and never again feel the crushing weight of losing someone he loved. The frontier was no place for love, only survival. That was what Quinn believed down to his bones. That belief lasted until the afternoon he found Sophia Sutton standing in the middle of the trail leading to town, her traveling trunk overturned in the dirt, and her jade green traveling dress covered in dust. She was 22 years old, with thick blonde hair pinned up in a style more suited to Boston than Wyoming, and eyes the color of warm honey that blazed with fury as she glared at the retreating stagecoach disappearing over the ridge. "Stop, you cannot just leave me here," she shouted, her voice carrying the clipped accent of New England education. "I paid full fare." Quinn reined in his horse, taking in the scene with practiced caution. A woman alone on the open trail meant trouble, and trouble was something he actively avoided. But even as he told himself to ride on, something about the determined set of her shoulders and the way she refused to cry despite her obvious predicament made him hesitate. "Ma'am," he called out, touching the brim of his hat, "you hurt." She whirled to face him, and Quinn felt something shift in his chest at the sight of her. She was beautiful in a way that seemed too refined for this rough country, with delicate features and skin that had clearly never known a day of hard labor. But her eyes held a stubborn strength that surprised him. "I am perfectly well, thank you, but that scoundrel of a stage driver refused to take me any farther. He said Copper Springs was too dangerous and turned the coach around." She crossed her arms over her chest. "I have traveled 2,000 miles to reach Copper Springs, and I am not about to let some coward with reins determine my fate. Copper Springs is 40 miles north, ma'am, and the driver was right. There has been trouble with outlaws along that route for the past month. 3 people killed, 2 coaches robbed." Quinn studied her carefully, noting the quality of her dress and the expensive trunk. "What business does a lady like you have in a mining camp like Copper Springs?" Something flickered in her eyes, pain, perhaps, or determination. "My brother owns a claim there. I am traveling to join him." "Your brother know you are coming." A pause too long to be entirely honest. "I wrote him 6 weeks ago." Quinn knew better than to involve himself. A sensible man would point her toward the nearest town with a hotel and ride away. But the sun was already lowering toward the horizon, and leaving a woman alone on the open trail was not something his conscience would allow, no matter how carefully he guarded his heart. "I will take you back to Laramie," he said finally. "There is a hotel there where you can wait for the next stage." "I am not going back to Laramie," her chin lifted. "I am going to Copper Springs." "Not today, you are not." "Then I will walk." Quinn studied her for a long moment, recognizing the kind of stubborn determination that would indeed send her walking into the wilderness alone. He thought about his plan to stay uninvolved, to keep his heart safely locked away. Then he thought about finding her body in a few days, torn apart by wolves or worse. "I can take you as far as the Turner Ranch," he said, the words leaving his mouth before his better judgment could stop them. It is halfway to Copper Springs. They might know if your brother is still at his claim and whether it is safe to travel there." Relief washed over her face, though she tried to hide it. "Thank you, I can pay for your trouble." "Keep your money." He dismounted and began gathering her scattered belongings. "But we need to move quick. There is weather coming, and we have 2 hours of riding before we reach shelter." As Quinn helped Sophia onto his horse and tied her trunk behind the saddle, he told himself this was just Christian charity, nothing more. He would deliver her to the Turner Ranch, make sure she was safe, and ride away. His carefully constructed walls would remain intact. He had no idea that Sophia Sutton was about to dismantle every belief he had about love and the frontier, one stubborn, surprising moment at a time. They rode in silence for the first hour, Sophia perched in front of him on the saddle, her back straight and her hands gripping the pommel. Quinn kept his arms on either side of her to hold the reins, acutely aware of her presence, the faint scent of lavender that clung to her despite the trail dust, the way she flinched at every sound from the surrounding grassland. "First time out west?" he asked, more to break the tension than from real curiosity. "Is it that obvious?" There was a hint of humor in her voice. "I grew up in Boston. The wildest thing I encountered there was a runaway milk cart." "Boston is a long way from Wyoming. Your family must be worried." Her shoulders stiffened. "I have no family left except my brother. Our parents died last year, father from a stroke, mother from a broken heart 2 months later. Samuel left for the gold fields before mother passed. He is all I have now." Quinn heard the loneliness in her voice, recognized it because it mirrored his own. Despite his determination to remain detached, he found himself asking, "What did you do in Boston before you came out here?" "I was a schoolteacher. I taught reading and arithmetic to children at a private academy." She paused. "The headmaster made it clear that my position was temporary after my parents died. Apparently, an unmarried woman without family connections is considered unsuitable for molding young minds." There was bitterness in her words, and Quinn understood that too. The world had a way of closing doors on people who stood alone. "Teaching is good work," he said. "Could be Copper Springs needs a schoolteacher if your brother's claim is not panning out." "Perhaps." She turned her head slightly, and he caught a glimpse of her profile against the darkening sky. "What about you? Have you always been a ranch hand?" Quinn hesitated, unused to talking about himself. "My parents brought me and my brother west on a wagon train in '61. They died on the trail. My brother and I worked whatever jobs we could find. He died 6 years ago. I have been on my own since." "I am sorry." The words were simple, but something in her tone suggested she truly understood loss. "It is the way of things out here," Quinn said, falling back on his familiar belief. "The frontier takes what it wants. Smart folks learn not to get too attached to anything." "That sounds like a terribly lonely way to live." Before Quinn could respond, his horse's ears pricked forward, and he felt the animal tense beneath them. His hand moved instinctively to the Colt revolver on his hip as he scanned the darkening landscape. "What is wrong?" Sophia whispered. "Quiet." Quinn's eyes tracked movement in the tall grass about 50 yards ahead. "Hold still." 3 riders emerged from a dry wash, spreading out to block the trail. Even in the fading light, Quinn could see they were not friendly travelers. Rough clothes, guns drawn, faces shadowed by hat brims pulled low. "Well now," the center rider called out, his voice carrying a nasty edge. "What do we have here? A cowboy and his lady friend out for an evening ride." Quinn's mind raced through options. 3 against 1 with Sophia to protect. Running would get them shot in the back. Fighting would put her directly in danger. That left talking, though experience told him these men were not interested in conversation. "Just passing through," Quinn said, keeping his voice steady. "We do not want trouble." "That is a real shame because trouble is exactly what we are offering." The lead rider urged his horse closer. "The lady can come with us. You can walk back to wherever you came from, provided you leave that gun belt in your horse." Sophia's hands tightened on the saddle pommel, and Quinn felt her trembling against him. Something fierce and protective surged through his chest, burning away his careful detachment. "That is not happening," Quinn said quietly. The outlaws laughed, but there was no humor in it. The leader raised his gun, pointing it directly at Quinn's chest. "You feeling brave or stupid, cowboy?" In that moment, Quinn made a choice that went against every survival instinct he had cultivated over the years. Instead of calculating odds or looking for an escape route that would save only himself, he thought only of keeping Sophia safe. His hand moved with practiced speed, drawing his Colt and firing in one fluid motion. The lead outlaw jerked backward in his saddle as Quinn's bullet caught him in the shoulder. The other two riders scattered, returning fire, but Quinn was already moving. He spurred his horse forward, charging directly at the nearest outlaw while shielding Sophia with his body. The bold move caught them off guard, and in the confusion, Quinn fired twice more, his bullets going wide but forcing the outlaws to break formation. "Hold on," Quinn shouted to Sophia as he wheeled his horse around and kicked it into a gallop, racing away from the trail into the open grassland. More shots rang out behind them, the bullets whistling past too close for comfort, but darkness was falling fast, and within minutes they had disappeared into the twilight. Quinn rode hard for another 20 minutes, following instinct and memory through the darkening landscape, until he spotted the familiar outline of an old line shack he had used during previous cattle drives. It was little more than a linta with 3 walls and a partial roof, but it would provide shelter and concealment for the night. He slid from the saddle and helped Sophia down, his hand steadying her when her legs nearly buckled. She was shaking, her face pale even in the dim light, but her eyes were dry. "Are you hit?" he asked urgently, running his hands over her arms and shoulders, checking for wounds. "No, no, I am fine." Her voice trembled but held. "You saved my life." "Maybe." Quinn unsaddled his horse and led the animal into the meager shelter of the shack. "Those men might come looking for us, but in the dark, they will have trouble tracking. We will stay here tonight and make for the Turner Ranch at first light." He had no matches for a fire, so they would spend the night in cold darkness. Quinn pulled a blanket from his bedroll and wrapped it around Sophia's shoulders, then settled against the back wall with his gun in his lap, watching the entrance. Sophia sat beside him, still wrapped in the blanket, her shoulder touching his in the small space. "You could have left me back there," she said softly. "You could have ridden away." "No, ma'am, I could not have." "Why not? You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." Quinn was quiet for a long moment, unsettled by the question because he did not have a good answer. By his own philosophy, he should have saved himself. Risking his life for a stranger contradicted everything he believed about survival on the frontier. "Would not have been right," he finally said. "You were shot at because of me." "I have been shot at before, comes with the territory." He glanced at her, finding her watching him with those honey-colored eyes that seemed to see too much. "You holding up all right?" "Most Eastern ladies would have fainted by now." "I do not faint." A hint of steel entered her voice. "And I am not most Eastern ladies. My mother always said I had an unfortunate stubborn streak and an unwillingness to behave as I ought." Apparently, proper young women do not argue with their betters or insist on reading books about science. Despite the tension of their situation, Quinn felt his mouth twitch toward a smile. "Sounds like your mother was right about the stubborn part. I suppose traveling 2,000 miles alone to find my brother in a mining camp proves her point." Sophia pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "Everyone in Boston told me I was being foolish. They said I should marry Mr. Whitmore, he owns a textile mill, and forget about Samuel. Mr. Whitmore was kind enough to offer for me even after my parents died and I had no dowry." "But you did not want to marry him." "I did not love him. He was 47 years old and already buried 2 wives. He wanted someone to manage his household and raise his 5 children. When I said I needed time to consider, he told me I should not be so particular given my circumstances." Her voice hardened. "So I took the little money my mother left me, bought a train ticket and came west." Quinn understood what she was not saying, that she had chosen uncertainty and danger over a loveless marriage, that she had gambled everything on finding her brother and building a new life. It was brave and reckless in equal measure, Your brother know what you sacrificed to find him. I hope I will get the chance to tell him. She turned to look at Quinn directly. What about you? You said the frontier is no place for attachments, but you risked your life for me tonight. That seems like an attachment. Her words hit too close to something Quinn was not ready to examine. That was just decent human behavior. Was it? Because from where I was sitting, it felt like more than that. She did not look away, and Quinn found himself unable to maintain the careful distance he usually kept. You could have tried to bargain with those men or found some other way. Instead, you charged straight at them. You made yourself a target to protect me. Should I have left you to them? No, but you also did not have to care so much. Her voice softened. I saw your face, Quinn. Right before you drew your gun, you looked angry, not scared, angry, like the thought of them hurting me made you furious. Quinn had no response to that because she was right. In that moment, some wall inside him had cracked, and he had felt something he had been careful not to feel for a very long time: protective fury, the kind that came from caring whether someone lived or died. Get some rest, he said gruffly, deflecting. We have a hard ride come morning. Sophia did not push further, but as she settled against the wall beside him, her head eventually coming to rest on his shoulder as exhaustion claimed her, Quinn stared out into the darkness and wondered what was happening to him. He had known this woman for less than 6 hours, yet something fundamental was shifting in his carefully ordered world. The frontier took everything. That was what he believed, but maybe, just maybe, he was wrong. Dawn broke cold and clear, painting the grasslands in shades of gold and amber. Quinn had not slept, keeping watch through the night, but when Sophia woke and looked up at him with those warm eyes, some of the weariness faded. They rode toward the Turner ranch in cautious silence, Quinn constantly scanning for signs of pursuit. The Turner spread appeared on the horizon around mid-morning, a collection of sturdy log buildings surrounded by corrals and pasture land. As they approached, a man emerged from the main house, a rifle cradled in his arms. Quinn Prescott, the man called out, lowering the rifle when he recognized him. You are a long way from the Double T. Morning, Frank. Quinn dismounted and helped Sophia down. Had some trouble on the trail yesterday. This is Miss Sutton. She is trying to reach her brother in Copper Springs. Frank Turner was in his 50s, weathered and competent, with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. His gaze moved from Quinn to Sophia and back again, clearly reading more into the situation than Quinn wanted to admit. Copper Springs is a rough place for a lady, Frank said carefully. What is your brother's name, Miss Sutton? Samuel Sutton. He has a claim somewhere near the camp. Frank's expression changed, and Quinn felt his stomach sink even before the older man spoke. Miss Sutton, maybe you should come inside. My wife will get you some breakfast. What is wrong? Sophia's voice was sharp with sudden fear. Do you know my brother? Come inside, ma'am, please. They followed Frank into the ranch house, where his wife Martha fussed over Sophia, bringing her coffee and food. But Sophia barely touched either, her attention fixed on Frank. Samuel Sutton worked his claim for about 8 months, Frank said slowly. I met him a few times when he came through buying supplies. Good man from what I could tell. Talked about his sister back east, how he was going to send for her once he struck it rich. Where is he? Sophia's hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles showed white. Is he still at the claim? Frank looked at his wife, then back at Sophia. I am sorry, Miss Sutton. Your brother was killed 6 weeks ago. There was a cave-in at his claim. He died instantly, along with 2 other miners. The color drained from Sophia's face. For a moment, Quinn thought she might actually faint, but she drew in a deep breath and straightened her shoulders, though her voice came out barely above a whisper. 6 weeks ago. Then he never received my letter. No, ma'am, I do not suppose he did. Sophia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Excuse me, I need a moment. She walked toward the door and Quinn followed, catching up with her outside. She had made it to the edge of the yard before she stopped, standing rigidly with her arms wrapped around herself. Sophia, Quinn said gently, I have nowhere to go. Her voice was flat, empty. I spent almost everything I had getting here. Samuel was all I had left, and he has been dead for 6 weeks while I was traveling across the country to find him. Quinn stood helplessly, wanting to comfort her but not knowing how. He had spent so long avoiding connection that he had forgotten how to offer it. I am completely alone, Sophia continued, and now her voice cracked. I ran away from Boston because I could not bear the thought of a loveless marriage, of living out my years in quiet desperation. I thought I was being brave, choosing my own path, but I was just being foolish. At least Mr. Whitmore offered security. Now I have nothing, no family, no money, no home. I do not even have enough for a train ticket back east. You are not alone. The words left Quinn's mouth before he could think them through. I will help you. She turned to face him, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Why? You do not know me, you do not owe me anything. Last night I told you that, and you had no answer. Quinn stepped closer, something loosening in his chest at the sight of her tears. Against every instinct of self-preservation, he reached out and gently wiped the moisture from her cheek with his thumb. Maybe I do not have a good reason, he admitted. But that does not change the fact that I am not going to leave you here with nothing. We will figure something out. You keep saying we, her eyes searched his face. Why? Quinn had no answer to that either, at least not one he was ready to speak aloud. The truth was that somewhere between finding her on the trail and watching her refuse to break even in the face of crushing loss, she had slipped past his defenses. He cared about what happened to her, and caring was dangerous. But apparently he was going to risk it anyway. Come back inside, he said. Let us talk to Frank and Martha, they might have ideas. Over the next hour, they learned that Samuel's claim had been worthless, a played-out vein that would never have produced enough gold to justify the work. The few belongings he had left were sold to cover his burial expenses. There was nothing for Sophia to inherit. You can stay here for a few days, Martha offered kindly. Rest up and figure out your next step. I appreciate that, ma'am, but I cannot impose on your hospitality without being able to pay for it. Sophia sat straighter, drawing on reserves of strength that Quinn was beginning to recognize as fundamental to her nature. Is there any work I could do? I am educated. I can read, write, and do mathematics. I can teach or keep accounts or... Actually, Martha interrupted, her eyes brightening, we might have something. Our children need a teacher. There are 5 families in this area with school-age children, but we have never had anyone qualified to teach them properly. If you were willing to stay on as a schoolteacher, we could build you a small cabin and pay you a modest wage. Hope flickered across Sophia's face. You would do that? We have been trying to find a teacher for 2 years, Frank said. Most folks who come west are not educated enough to teach, and those who are educated do not want to live in the middle of nowhere. You would be doing us a favor. Sophia looked at Quinn, and he saw both hope and uncertainty in her expression. It would mean staying here, in Wyoming. I would not be going back to Boston. Is there anything in Boston for you? Quinn asked quietly. No, she drew a deep breath. No, there is not. If you are serious about this offer, Mr. and Mrs. Turner, then yes, I accept. As the Turners began discussing practical details about building a cabin and organizing the children, Quinn stepped outside, needing air. His heart was pounding in a way that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with the fact that Sophia would be staying in the territory. He would not have to say goodbye to her in a few days. She would be here close enough that he could see her again. That thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like relief. Frank joined him a few minutes later, leaning against the corral fence. You got it bad, son. I do not know what you mean. The hell you don't. I have known you for 3 years, Quinn. You have never brought a woman to my ranch before, never even mentioned being interested in one. Now here you are, looking at Miss Sutton like she is water, and you have been dying of thirst. Quinn shook his head. It is not like that, I just wanted to help her. Keep telling yourself that. Frank's voice was not unkind, but I saw how you looked when those tears started falling. You were ready to tear apart the world to make things better for her. The frontier is no place for, Quinn stopped, realizing how hollow the words sounded even to his own ears. No place for what? Love. Family, Frank turned to face him directly. I have been married to Martha for 30 years. We raised 4 children out here, lost one to scarlet fever when he was 6, buried my parents on this land. I have seen drought, blizzards, Indian raids, and cattle thieves. And I am here to tell you that the frontier is exactly the place for love. It is the only damn thing that makes the hard times bearable. Quinn wanted to argue, to retreat behind his carefully constructed philosophy, but the words would not come. Because somewhere in the past 24 hours, Sophia Sutton had proven that maybe Frank was right. Maybe love was not a weakness. Maybe it was the thing that gave you a reason to survive. The cabin was completed 3 weeks later, a sturdy one-room structure with a stone fireplace and real glass windows. Quinn found reasons to ride over from the Double T nearly every day, telling himself he was just helping with construction, but everyone, including himself, knew better. He watched Sophia transform from a traumatized refugee into a determined pioneer. She threw herself into preparing for her teaching duties, organizing books donated by the local families, creating lesson plans, and visiting each family to introduce herself. There was a brightness in her that the frontier had not yet dimmed, a stubborn optimism that seemed to defy the harshness around her. And Quinn found himself drawn to that brightness like a man who had spent too long in the dark. "You are staring again," Sophia said one afternoon as they worked together, arranging desks in her new schoolroom. "Just making sure you are settling and all right." She set down the book she was holding and turned to face him, a knowing look in her eyes. "Quinn, you ride 40 miles round trip almost every day just to check on me. When are you going to admit what is really happening here?" "What do you think is happening?" His heart was beating too fast. "I think you are scared." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her eyes. "I think you have convinced yourself that caring about people is dangerous, so you push everyone away. But then I came along, and somehow I got past your walls, and now you do not know what to do with what you are feeling." Quinn opened his mouth to deny it, but the words would not come because she was right. She had seen through him from the beginning. "I lost everyone I ever cared about," he said quietly, the admission costing him. "My parents, my brother, the woman I planned to marry. Every time I let myself hope for something permanent, the frontier took it away. It is easier not to feel anything. Easier perhaps, but also lonelier." Sophia reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm against his calloused palm. "I understand being afraid, Quinn. I crossed a continent alone because I was terrified of living half a life in Boston. I thought I would find safety with my brother, but he was gone before I even arrived. I have every reason to give up, to believe that hope is foolish, but I am choosing not to." "Why?" "Because you showed me that there are still good people in the world. That even in the hardest places, someone might care enough to risk their life for a stranger." She squeezed his hand. "You changed something in me, Quinn. You made me believe that maybe the frontier is not just a harsh, lonely place. Maybe it can also be a place where people take care of each other." Quinn stared at her, his carefully constructed beliefs crumbling. "I do not know how to do this," he admitted. "I do not know how to let myself care and not be terrified of losing you." "Then we will figure it out together." She smiled, and it was like sunrise. "That is what people do when they care about each other, is it not? They face their fears together." Quinn pulled her closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. "I have been fighting this from the moment I saw you standing in that trail." "I know, but you are done fighting it now, are you not?" Instead of answering, Quinn lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was still half afraid she might disappear. But then Sophia's arms came around his neck, and something in him surrendered completely. The kiss deepened, and for the first time in years, Quinn allowed himself to feel the full weight of emotion he had been holding back, not just attraction, but hope and longing and the terrifying, exhilarating possibility of a future with another person. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sophia rested her forehead against his chest. "So what happens now?" Now, Quinn tipped her chin up so he could see her eyes. Now I stop pretending I do not need you. Now I start courting you properly, if you will let me. Properly, she laughed, the sound bright with joy. Quinn, we have already been shot at by outlaws and spent a night alone together in a lined shack. I think propriety may be past us. Then I will court you improperly. I will ride 40 miles every day just to see you smile. I will. She stopped his words with another kiss, and Quinn decided that maybe the frontier was not such a lonely place after all. The school opened in early October with 12 students ranging from age 6 to 15. Quinn attended the opening day, standing in the back of the room with the other parents, watching Sophia command the classroom with natural authority. She was patient with the younger children and challenging with the older ones, and by the end of the first week, every family in the area was singing her praises. Quinn courted her through the autumn, their relationship deepening with each passing week. He taught her to ride properly, taking her out on the open range and showing her the beauty of the territory. The way the mountains turned purple at sunset, the vast silence of the prairie, the hidden valleys where wildflowers bloomed. She taught him that opening his heart did not mean inevitable loss, that love could exist alongside the hardships of frontier life. They talked about everything and nothing, her childhood in Boston, his memories of the wagon train west, their dreams for the future. Sophia wanted to establish a proper school that could serve the whole region. Quinn confessed his dream of owning land, of building something permanent. We could do it together, Sophia said one evening as they sat on the porch of her cabin, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Buy land, build a home. I could still teach, but we would have a place that was ours. Quinn pulled her closer, marveling at how natural it felt to have her tucked against his side. You would really want that. Building a life out here with me. I want a life with you wherever that happens to be, but yes, I have grown to love it here. It is harsh and difficult, but it is also beautiful and honest. People are what they are, with no pretense. And there is space here, space to become whoever you want to be, not who society says you must be. Quinn kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. For the first time in his adult life, he allowed himself to imagine a future beyond mere survival, a home, a family, roots sunk deep into this land he loved. But the past had a way of refusing to stay buried. In late November, 3 months after Quinn and Sophia had met, a stranger rode up to the Turner Ranch looking for Quinn. Frank sent word and Quinn rode over, arriving to find a hard-eyed man in his 40s waiting in the yard. You Quinn Prescott? The stranger asked. I am. Who are you? Name is Jack Monroe. I'm a federal marshal out of Denver. I am looking for a gang that has been terrorizing the territory for the past 6 months. Robbery, murder, cattle rustling. They hit a payroll shipment near Laramie 2 weeks ago, killed 3 guards. Quinn felt ice form in his stomach. What does this have to do with me? One of the gang members is a young man named Clay Sutton, goes by Sam sometimes. Monroe pulled a photograph from his pocket and handed it to Quinn. That looked familiar. Quinn stared at the image, a man in his late 20s with hard eyes and a cruel mouth. There was a resemblance to Sophia in the shape of the face and the color of the eyes, but where she was warmth and light, this man radiated violence. That is not Samuel Sutton, Quinn said carefully. Samuel Sutton died in a mine collapse 6 weeks before I met his sister. I know, we confirmed his death, but Clay Sutton used his dead brother's identity to establish the mining claim. He was hiding out there, using it as a base while he and his gang planned their raids. When the real Samuel's claim collapsed and killed him, Clay just moved on to his next hideout. But before he left, he went through Samuel's belongings and found letters from a sister in Boston. Quinn's blood went cold. What kind of letters? Letters that mentioned she had saved up money from teaching. Letters that said she was planning to come west and join him. Monroe's face was grim. We have reason to believe Clay Sutton is planning to intercept his dead brother's sister, probably to rob her and possibly worse. We have been tracking his gang north. They are somewhere in this area. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Sophia, Quinn breathed, that her name she hear. Quinn was already moving toward his horse. She is teaching school about a mile from here. If your information is right, she is in danger." He galloped toward the schoolhouse, his heart pounding with a fear he had never felt before, not for himself, but for the woman who had become more important to him than his own life. Behind him, Monroe and Frank Turner followed, but Quinn barely registered their presence. All he could think about was getting to Sophia before Clay Sutton did. The schoolhouse looked peaceful as Quinn approached, smoke rising from the chimney, children's voices drifting through the windows. For a moment relief flooded through him. He had been fast enough. She was safe. Then he saw the horses tied near the trees behind the building, 3 of them, concealed from the road but visible from the angle of his approach. Quinn vaulted from his horse before it stopped moving, his gun drawn as he burst through the schoolhouse door. The classroom had gone silent. The children huddled in the corner, eyes wide with fear. Sophia stood near her desk, her face pale but composed. And between Quinn and Sophia stood 3 men, guns drawn, with the same hard-eyed cruelty he had seen in the photograph. "Well," said the man who must be Clay Sutton, "this is convenient. You must be the cowboy who found my dear sister on the trail. The Turner family mentioned you have been courting her." "How sweet." "Let the children go," Quinn said, his voice deadly calm. "Your quarrel is not with them." "I have no quarrel with anyone. I am just here to collect what is owed to me." Clay grabbed Sophia's arm, pulling her against him. She did not cry out, but Quinn saw her wince. "My dear brother Samuel left me a sister with money. I figure she owes me for using his name and his claim." "I have no money," Sophia said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "I spent everything getting here." "That is unfortunate, but I am sure your cowboy friend there might be willing to compensate me for my loss. What do you say, friend? How much is she worth to you?" Quinn kept his gun trained on Clay, aware that the other 2 gang members had their weapons pointed at him. Behind him he heard horses approaching, Monroe and Frank arriving, but they would not reach the schoolhouse in time to change the immediate situation. "Let the children go," Quinn repeated. "Then we can talk about compensation." Clay laughed. "You are in no position to negotiate, cowboy. Drop your gun, or I put a bullet in her right now." Time seemed to slow. Quinn saw the malice in Clay's eyes, the fear in Sophia's face, the terror in the children cowering in the corner. Every instinct screamed at him to keep his gun, to fight, to refuse to surrender his only advantage. But then Sophia's eyes met his, and he saw something that changed everything. She was not just afraid for herself, she was afraid for him, for the children, for everyone in this room. And in that moment, Quinn understood what she had been trying to teach him all along. Love was not about surviving alone. It was about being willing to sacrifice everything for someone else. Quinn slowly lowered his gun, placing it on the floor. "Let them all go, take me instead. I have money saved, enough to make it worth your while. Just let everyone else walk out of here." "Quinn, no," Sophia said urgently. "It is all right," he told her, his eyes never leaving hers. "I am not afraid anymore." For a moment Clay seemed to consider the offer. Then Marshal Monroe's voice rang out from outside. "This is a federal marshal. You are surrounded. Send out the children and the woman, and you might live through this." Clay's face twisted with rage. He shoved Sophia away from him toward Quinn, and for one terrible second, Quinn thought he was going to shoot her anyway. But instead, Clay grabbed one of the older boys, a 12-year-old named Tommy, and pressed his gun to the child's head. "Here is what is going to happen," Clay shouted toward the door. "We are walking out of here with the kid. You let us ride away, or I kill him." "No," Sophia lunged forward, but one of the other gang members grabbed her, throwing her to the ground. Something snapped in Quinn. All the years of holding back, of protecting himself, of refusing to care, they shattered in an instant. He moved with furious speed, tackling the man who had thrown Sophia down, driving his fist into the outlaw's jaw with enough force to knock him unconscious. The second gang member swung his gun toward Quinn, but one of the older students, a brave 15-year-old named Jacob, grabbed a piece of firewood and swung it at the outlaw's knees. In the chaos, Clay's attention wavered. Tommy twisted in his grip, biting down hard on the outlaw's arm. Clay cursed and loosened his hold just enough for the boy to break free. "Get down!" Quinn roared at the children as gunfire erupted. Marshall Monroe and Frank burst through the door, guns blazing. One of Clay's men went down immediately. The second tried to run but was tackled by Frank. Clay himself fired twice at Quinn, both shots going wide as Quinn dove for his own gun on the floor. Sophia scrambled to the children, throwing herself over the youngest ones, shielding them with her body. Quinn rolled to his feet, his gun coming up just as Clay took aim at Sophia's unprotected back. Time stopped. Quinn saw the calculation in Clay's eyes, the murderous intent. He saw Sophia covering the children, saw the life they could have together hanging by a thread. Quinn fired. His bullet caught Clay in the chest, and the outlaw dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The gunfire echoed in the sudden silence. Then chaos erupted as parents who had heard the shooting rushed in, sweeping their children into their arms. Marshall Monroe secured the surviving gang members, while Frank checked that everyone was unharmed. Quinn crossed the room to where Sophia sat among the children, her arms wrapped around two sobbing 6-year-olds. She looked up at him, her face streaked with tears, and he saw in her eyes everything he needed to know: relief, love, and the same profound realization he was experiencing. They had nearly lost each other. They had nearly lost everything. Quinn helped her to her feet as parents collected the last of the children. When they were finally alone except for the marshal, who was dealing with the bodies outside, Sophia collapsed against Quinn's chest, her whole body shaking. "I thought he was going to kill you," she whispered. "When you put down your gun, I thought." "I know," Quinn held her tightly, his face buried in her hair. "I know, but I had to make that choice. I had to protect you and those children, even if it meant dying. I finally understood what you have been trying to teach me." "What is that?" "That some things are worth dying for. But more importantly, they are worth living for." He pulled back enough to see her face. "I have spent years being afraid of loss, convinced that caring was dangerous. But today, when I thought I might lose you, I realized that not caring would be so much worse. Even if I only have you for a short time, it is worth the risk. You are worth everything." Sophia's tears flowed freely now, but she was smiling. "You infuriating man. Do you have any idea how terrified I was watching you give up your gun? Probably as terrified as I was watching you throw yourself over those children." He cupped her face in his hands. "Sophia Sutton, you are the bravest, most stubborn, most extraordinary woman I have ever met. You took a broken, scared man and taught him how to hope again. You changed my life in ways I am still discovering." "You changed mine too," she said softly. "You showed me that strength is not about facing the world alone. It is about finding someone worth facing it with." Quinn kissed her then, pouring everything he felt into that kiss. Love and gratitude and fierce determination to build a life worthy of what they had found together. When they finally broke apart, Marshall Monroe was standing in the doorway, politely studying the ceiling. "Sorry to interrupt, but I need statements from both of you. Also, there is a reward for the Sutton gang, $500. I figure you two have earned it." $500. Combined with Quinn's savings, it was enough to buy land, enough to start building their future. Quinn looked at Sophia, saw his own thoughts reflected in her eyes, and knew they were thinking the same thing. This was not the end of their story. It was the beginning. They were married in the spring of 1874 in a simple ceremony at the Turner Ranch with the entire community in attendance. Sophia wore a dress of cream silk that Martha Turner had helped her sew, and Quinn wore his best clothes, his sandy hair neatly trimmed and his face clean-shaven. But it was not the clothing or the ceremony that people would remember. It was the way Quinn and Sophia looked at each other, with the kind of love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. With the reward money and their savings combined, they purchased 200 acres of good grazing land 20 miles east of the Turner Ranch. The land had a creek running through it, stands of timber for building, and rich grass for cattle. It was everything Quinn had dreamed of and more, because he was building it with Sophia. They spent that first summer constructing their home, a proper house with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a parlor. Quinn hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work and to start building up a small herd of cattle. Sophia continued teaching through the summer, riding to the schoolhouse 3 days a week. But she also threw herself into making their house a home, sewing curtains, planting a garden, learning to cook on a wood stove. They worked side by side, and Quinn marveled daily at how Sophia took to frontier life. She learned to ride well, to shoot a rifle, to deliver a calf and treat a sick cow. But she never lost her refinement or her love of books and learning. Their home became a gathering place for neighbors, who would stop by for dinner and stay for hours, talking and laughing. In the fall of 1874, Sophia discovered she was pregnant. Quinn took the news with a joy he had never expected to feel, gathering her up in his arms and spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "Are you scared?" she asked him later that night as they lay in bed, her head on his chest. "Terrified," he admitted. "What if something happens to you? What if I lose?" She pressed her fingers to his lips. "You will not lose me. We are going to be fine, and you are going to be a wonderful father." "How do you know?" "Because you love fiercely and completely once you let yourself. Our children will never doubt they are cherished." Children, plural. The thought filled Quinn with equal parts terror and wonder. Their daughter was born in May of 1875, delivered with Martha Turner's help in the bedroom of their ranch house. Sophia labored for 12 hours, and Quinn paced outside like a caged wolf until Martha finally emerged and told him he had a healthy daughter. He entered the bedroom to find Sophia propped up in bed, exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "Meet your daughter," she said softly. Quinn approached cautiously, awed by the tiny perfection of the baby's face. She had Sophia's nose and mouth, but his blue eyes. When Sophia placed her in his arms, Quinn felt something shift fundamentally in his soul. "We should name her Grace," he said, "because that is what you both are, grace I never deserved but received anyway." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "Grace Prescott, it is perfect." Their son was born 2 years later, a robust boy they named Samuel in honor of Sophia's brother. By then, the Prescott ranch was thriving. Quinn's herd had grown to over 100 head, and he had built a proper barn and bunkhouse. Sophia had reduced her teaching to 2 days a week, focusing more on their home and children, though she still maintained a small collection of students from the nearby families. The years that followed brought both hardships and joys. There were droughts that tested their resolve, harsh winters that killed cattle, and the constant challenge of frontier life. But there were also summers of plenty, children's laughter filling the house, and long evenings on the porch watching the sun set over their land. Quinn never forgot the lesson Sophia had taught him, that love was not a weakness but a strength, that opening your heart to another person did not make you vulnerable, but rather gave you a reason to be strong. He loved Sophia more with each passing year, and she loved him with the same fierce devotion. They grew old together on that ranch, watching their children grow and eventually bring home partners of their own. Grace married a young rancher from Montana and settled 40 miles north. Samuel took over the family ranch, proving to be as capable as his father at reading land and cattle. On a warm evening in the summer of 1903, Quinn and Sophia sat on their porch as they had countless times before. They were in their 50s now, weathered by decades of frontier life but still strong. Quinn's hair had gone silver, and Sophia wore glasses for reading. But when she looked at him, he still saw the stubborn, brave young woman who had stood on a trail with her overturned trunk and refused to give up. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had ridden past you that day?" Quinn asked, taking her hand in his. Sophia smiled, the same smile that had captured his heart 30 years earlier. "No, because you would never have ridden past. Even then, before you admitted it to yourself, you were a man who could not turn away from someone in need. You changed me, you know. You changed everything I believed about the world." "We changed each other," Sophia corrected gently. "I was running from a half-life in Boston, terrified of ending up alone and forgotten. You showed me that real strength is not independence but interdependence, that we are stronger together than we could ever be apart." Quinn raised her hand to his lips, kissing her weathered fingers with the same tenderness he had shown on their wedding day. "I love you, Sophia Prescott. I have loved you from the moment you refused to give up on reaching your brother, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." I love you too. Always have, always will. They sat in companionable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, their grandchildren playing in the yard, the ranch spreading out around them like a testament to what two people could build when they faced the world together. Quinn thought about the young man he had been, convinced that the frontier was no place for love, that survival meant keeping your heart guarded. He had been so wrong. The frontier was exactly the place for love. It was the love that made survival worthwhile. And Sophia had taught him that day by day, year by year, through every hardship and every joy. She had taken a broken, frightened man and shown him that opening your heart to another person was not a weakness but the most courageous thing a person could do. They had changed each other's lives in mysterious ways, not through grand gestures or dramatic transformations, but through the quiet accumulation of shared days, mutual support, and unwavering devotion. They had built something permanent in an impermanent world, something that would outlast them and the children they raised and the land they had tamed together. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, Quinn helped Sophia to her feet and they walked inside their home, the home they had built together from nothing, the home that had sheltered their family and their love for 3 decades. The frontier had tested them in 1,000 ways, but it had not broken them. Instead, it had forged them into something stronger, something that would endure long after they were gone, a legacy of love, courage, and the understanding that the greatest adventures are not found in solitary survival, but in the journey two people take together. And that was the truest measure of their unlikely love story, not that they had survived the harsh frontier, but that they had transformed it into a home where love could flourish, where children could grow, where two people who had once believed themselves too broken or too alone could build a life of profound meaning and joy. The light from their windows spilled out into the Wyoming night, a beacon of warmth in the vast darkness, proof that even in the loneliest places, love could take root and grow into something beautiful and enduring. Their story was one of transformation and hope, a testament to the idea that two people could change each other's lives simply by choosing, every day, to face the world together rather than alone. And in the end, that choice made all the difference.